Hello and good afternoon to all of you from the NorthCap University, and welcome back to the NorthCap Masterclass, a series of talks where you get to listen to eminent thinkers, scholars, practitioners and leaders from various fields sharing their perspectives on what's going on in the world and why it should matter to you as future professionals. University has a unique place in the human society as an institution that can transform people and shape their minds. And this power comes from its people. Great universities are magnets for finest students and faculty. Over the past 25 years, the NorthCap University has been such a place, a meeting ground of talented students and faculty. That our graduates are welcomed all over the world in leading companies and in top universities abroad should come as a no surprise. At NCU, we take deep interest in the future of mankind. Just look at our specializations in engineering, management, and law, from artificial intelligence to augmented reality, to cybersecurity, to analytics and data science, to digital marketing, and specializations in law. We cover it all. We take pains to offer a degree that will matter in future. And that makes us a leading university. This intent also drives our recent collaboration with Arizona State University, which is exclusively the first of its kind in India in terms of coverage, breadth, and depth. All this designed to give you a degree that will be useful for the rest of your working life. Dear students, in this series, we have been talking about how technology has impacted the society. We live in a tech-dominated economy, and good governance is essential to absorb the technology and turn its advantages to create jobs of the future. But what if the government neglects to perform its duties? It is through the freedom of press, guaranteed by our constitution, the empowered citizen can hold the government accountable. It is for the press and news media to remind the rich and powerful to be accountable, to hold a mirror to the faces of politicians, bureaucrats, judiciary, industrialists, and so on. We all have witnessed how critical the role of news media has been in exposing the various scandals and scams, and in pursuing cases such as Jyoti Singh, also known as Nirbhaya. In this session, we will hear from someone who has been in the thick of things of this very important. Let me introduce our guest, Ms. Chaudhury. Ms. Shoma Chaudhury is a journalist, editor, and a political commentator. She was the managing editor and co-founder of Tehelka. She also co-founded Algebra, the Arts and Ideas Club, a platform for conversations with prominent Indians. Shoma is the founder of Lucid Lines Productions, an intellectual properties company, and recently started a new show on the YouTube channel, Inquiry with Shoma Chaudhury. She has reported extensively on justice, social equity, environment, human rights, media, law, and conflict over resources. She has built a reputation for in-depth ground reportage and incisive commentary across disciplines. In 2011, Newsweek, the publication from US, named her as one of the 150 power women who shake the world. For her work on political journalism, she has received the Mumbai Press Club Award in 2012, the Sabia Doro Ernest Hemingway Award in 2013, and in 2009, she received the Ramnath Goenka Award and the Chameli Devi Jain Award for Outstanding Women Media Person. She is a graduate of Lady Shri Ram College, New Delhi, and a topper of BA and MA English at Delhi University. She will speak on the topic Homo Deus, how to be human in the super tech world. As always, you can write your questions and responses in the chat. Shoma, welcome to the NorthCap University, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor. And hi, everyone. It's disconcerting when we can't see those that we are speaking with. And that, in a way, kind of melds in well with the topic that I want to talk about today, which is really about how to be human in a technological world. And I gather that almost 50% of you, hopefully listening in, are, have interests in pursuing degrees in technology. And yet your university tries to meld the whole stream of humanities along with science. And I think that that's a really crucial endeavor for any institution now, and actually for all of us as individuals, because what we are faced with is, in a sense, a phase of our history as a human race, which is almost unparalleled. And that is that we're truly in the advent of a post-technological world. And the reason I want to draw attention to this is that when you're all at the threshold of entering a world of invention, of knowledge, of impact creation, it's very crucial to understand the nature of this power that we have unleashed for ourselves. So, the advantages of technology are too well known for me to really get into that. It's evident around us at every given moment of our lives. Even at this moment as we speak, with the pandemic, it's become so easy to connect with people across the world because of this technology, Zoom and all the other kinds of communication technologies that have come up, digital economy, digital delivery, digital education, digital health, digital agricultural connection, the whole connectivity entrepreneurship that is so gigantic, and it's so evident that I don't need to go into it. And in every other way, information sharing, Google, social media. So forgive me if I don't accentuate the positivities. What I wanted to draw attention to is that the heart of all this lies a big dilemma, which is that when we have unleashed this power, there's this common phrase now that AI is the new electricity, data is the new oil, so we really have to understand that we are in a completely new industrial phase, or as I said, a post-technological. So when we have unleashed this power, we have to understand the nature of that power. And there are very interesting philosophers, technology philosophers, who are really grappling with the dilemma that we have created for ourselves. So let me start with someone that you'll all be familiar with, which is Yuval Varadi. He wrote the book Sapiens, which caught global attention. And then he wrote the book Homo Deus, which is what I took my, the name of the session for. And what he's really examining there is that with AI, with machine learning, with all the kind of, the idea of singularity that we're moving towards, what we have done is to de-link intelligence from human consciousness. Today, machines are actually more intelligent than human beings. They can process data faster. And through that, what we're really doing is making of ourselves units of data, and by interlinking this data, we have unleashed this kind of power for ourselves and across the world. But as we de-link intelligence from consciousness, we are increasingly driven by the technology. So we are serving the technology rather than the technology serving us. Now we're still at a phase of development where that is not a clock that can't be turned back. And this idea of asymmetry in power, that are we serving technology or was technology meant to serve us, is at that, it's at that cliffhanger moment where if we develop knowledge, awareness, conversation around it, we can still take control of it. Now and if we don't, then we are headed for the kind of world that Yuval Varadi describes in Homo Deus, where we will really become subservient to technology, and meaning, purpose, all of that will be leached away from our lives, and we can't even prefigure what will 2200 look like. But let me just circle back to something which we can still see in our everyday lives. So this idea of us being driven by technology is most evident in our social media world. Now, again, we know the advantages, whether it's in terms of connectivity, protests, young people getting their voice heard, democratic voices, all of that has been enabled. But what we don't realize is that all of this is also being coded. Now, many of you may have watched the film Social Dilemma. That really strikes at the heart of it. And it's not like, arty-farty literature students like me or liberals who are bringing this up. The film Social Dilemma has been made out of conversations with people who were at the heart of the technological design for social media, for all the big social companies, the internet companies. And these are dissenters who've broken away from that. And they're talking about the deep discomfort and dismay and, almost ethical crisis that they face in knowing about what has been the design of this technology. Now, what is it that they're concerned about? We know that there's an addictive quality to this technology. Well, that's really the least of it. We know that it feeds a dopamine loop. It triggers certain chemicals in your brain, which makes you want to be enslaved to it, because it's a feedback loop. But so there's that aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is that the entire business and profit motive of these companies arises not just out of our addiction to it as a pleasurable activity, but that they have analyzed your brain to understand that what really creates stickiness, addictiveness, escalated activity online is negative emotions. So it's hatred, it's anger, it's mob behavior. And what they're really doing is to trigger that because you feel more and more reinforced, and they're literally playing with the chemicals in your brain to create what looks like natural democratic activity. Now it's not. So the purpose of why I picked this session up was that to become utterly consciously aware that technology is not something sui generis. It's not something that just exists outside of human motive. Right now, we are like giving birth to technology. So we are designing it. Soon it will live outside of ourselves. So now is the time when we can create ethical frameworks, awareness around it. If we are not aware of that, then we will create technology that will ultimately cannibalize, our humanness and then eventually make us subservient to it. So one is this negative loops. The other is that no algorithm, no code exists, as I said, without somebody coding it and designing it. So the thing that we need to become aware of is who is coding something, who is designing something. Now, for all other public activities, we have a constitution, we have laws, we have regulations, we have public discourse, we have, heated public debates for anything which will impact all of us at a large public level, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's sexuality, whether it's politics, whether anything, But here is something which is impacting us on such a gigantic scale, and yet we are not discussing any ethical frameworks. There's no constitution for technology anywhere in the world today. And that lies at the heart of the problem. It lies at the heart of us retrieving our humanness, our individuality. Because if there is no thought process which is analyzing who is designing this technology, is it the white male? Is it someone with a racist bias? Because all technology has a bias, all coding has a bias. How it will play out, who it will exclude, who it will include, everything in the way that algorithm is designed has a bias. So if you're not aware of that, if we don't create a framework around it, we will create immense imbalances in the world. And we are seeing that played out right now, as I said, in these deep impacts which are happening without our knowledge. When I talked about negative loops, the profit motive of this technology, we are increasingly, you're young people, I'm sure you're disturbed very often by the kind of political discourse around us. Everything is us, it's like black and white. You may, in the silence of your own mind, have complex emotions. You may have complex thoughts about something, but you can't articulate that in public space. It's clearly us and them. It's very polarized. It's very hate-driven. And one feels that that's the nature of our time. What we're not understanding is that technology has actually completely changed our politics. It's changed our public life. It's changed what you and I can feel or say or do or not do, what you as young people can articulate. All of that is being defined by someone that we have no oversight over. So it's a dictatorship of a completely next level because there's no human face to that dictatorship. We are being driven by something that we are not even being able to talk about. So that understanding of what is the coding bias, who are the coders, what is the motive behind it, what should be allowed or not allowed. And I don't mean here in terms of restriction on invention, but some discussion about impact. Like I said, a constitution for technology. Now so I spoke about Yuval Harari, I spoke about the film Social Dilemma. There are other fascinating people that I feel, it would be great if you don't already know of them, look them up. For instance, there's a technology philosopher called Jaron Lanier, who has literally coded he came up with the word virtual reality, and all of Silicon Valley admires him. Back in the 80s, they were really the ones who were pushing the boundaries of the possible. Now, Jaron Lanier has written a book which says you should delete your social media accounts immediately, and he gives reasons for why. And there are 2 or 3 very important ones that I'd like to point out. One is that he's come up with an acronym for all of this that I'm talking about, and he calls them the BUMMER technologies. And what BUMMER stands for is behavior of users modified for profit of and making empires, with behavior of users modified bummers to make empires of rent, something like that. Look it up. But what it really means is what I've been talking about, that all of these technology companies are using your and my behavior. They are dictating that behavior. They are triggering that behavior and literally modifying it to be able to make money out of it. So our behavior has become the commodity. So he speaks of that. The other thing that he speaks of is the hive mentality. So if today, I could look at any recent events, think of the outcry over Sushant Singh Rajput's suicide, so angry, so, almost medieval in the desire to find someone to string up and hang someone, kill someone, there was no scope to even think or put out the suggestion that someone who was very popular, someone who was very gifted, someone who was very successful may have had a mental health condition which led to his suicide. That conversation was not possible because the hive mentality had taken over, and it was only possible to look for someone to punish, for his death. And anyone who could put a counter view out was immediately seen as someone that belongs to someone powerful, someone part of a conspiracy. So this kind of heightened public discourse, it's not democratic voice. Democratic voice, we must remember, a heart of a democracy is individuals. All of us have individual rights. In a mobocracy, which the internet has become, you don't have individual rights. You are not allowed individual thoughts. You have to belong to a group. You have to belong to a hive mind. It's called groupthink. And if you fit in that group, you feel secure. You feel your decision making is right. You feel morally right. Now, there are psychological studies about all of this. It's not just me speaking of it. Now, I hope some of you can feel that what I'm speaking about is the reality that you're undergoing every day of your life, And so, as I said, we have to constantly be aware that how do we remain human? How do we remain individuals? How do we protect democracy? How do we protect our freedoms under this new, faceless, very powerful, very enabling, and very confusing new dictatorship of technology within which we live? So that was, as I said, in this connectivity technology that I spoke of. Now, there are other impacts, the other use of AI is so much, we're using it in banking, we're using it in criminal surveillance, we're using it in police, speculative policing that they do, or predictive policing as they call it. We're doing it for face recognition, for commercial purposes. Now, all of that, again, has massive impacts. The impacts are, I'll give you one very stark example. There's, again, a very young woman, a Black woman called Joy Bulwami. You can look her up. She's part of something called Algorithms of Justice. And what they're analyzing, and they bring up, incidents and case studies where, again, because of coding bias, a face recognition module will be able to recognize someone who's fair, someone who's white, someone who looks a particular way. And up until they brought this up and to talk the sociological impacts of technology, Black people were being blanked out by this AI. So that's how, stark the bias can become. But similarly, predictive policing has found that, again, I'm talking in America because that's really where these case studies are being done, that a Black person is 50% more likely to be stopped by a predictive policing technology, algorithms, police checks, than a white person. That's again how stark the bias in these coding and AI can become. Again, as I said, if we are not going to create awareness and constitutionalism and sociological, anthropological discussions around legal, ethical discussions around technology. So, I've just kind of hinted at that. So it'll define whether you can get a job. Increasingly as databases are used, AI is used for, doing job searches, etc. Even your access to finance, your access to banks. Now, if you're using a human interface backed by technology, you'll always have the first thing I spoke of, consciousness. You'll have compassion, but an algorithmic interface can be highly intelligent, but it may not necessarily have compassion. It may not have that capacity to make a moral distinction. Now, I'll just point, because your university is trying to bring together different streams, I'd like to speak about literature, and I'll point you to one book, Ian McEwan's Machines Like Me. And it's a fascinating book where he's talked about a kind of love triangle between two beings and a highly intelligent social robot. And I won't go into the story, but at the heart of it lies a very interesting twist. This robot falls deeply in love with this human being, but he ends up getting her arrested for something that she did many, many years ago, and which has many gray areas. But the robot who loves her, he's willing to kill for her, but he's not able to make that human distinction. He's not able to grasp the grays, and he's not able to tell the distinction between a white lie, with complex moral implications, and just a black and white sense of right and wrong. So it's again pointing to extreme intelligence, that machine can data process the entire library of Nalanda and come up with something, will hyper process maths, come up with something, will be able to learn languages, will be able to mimic human intelligence, but at the heart of it is not able to mimic something so basic as the fact that all of us tell, we all have gray areas, we all have little lies, we all have, the way in which humans interact with each other, it's not able to do, and it has disastrous consequences. And so before I start to take questions, I'd like to now come to the other impact area of technology, which is the job displacement. Now here again, there is the obvious that with every new technology, and we now speak of technology only in these terms, but we have to remind ourselves that even the creation of a pen or the printing press, or indeed anything, it was a technological jump, And at that time, when the car, when the Industrial Revolution came, of course, horse carriages were set aside, but then new jobs were created. So at one level, when you talk to people who are really involved, people like Nandan Nilekani and others, they are all optimistic and they feel new jobs will be created. Of course, old jobs will fall away. And so I'm not necessarily getting into the math of that. But at the same time, again, it is important that when we are focusing our intelligence and our attention on technology, there's one cutting edge level of technological invention, which is like genetic sciences, it's the science and technology mix, just pure invention. But if there's an application-based technology, it's again crucial to link it back to some degree of human problem solving. Are you as young people embarking on technology going to look at social technologies? How do you elevate climate change? How do we create green energies? How do we link agriculture, farmers? In a country like India where there's extreme disparity, will we deploy our intelligence in problem solving, social problem solving, or will all of us only hanker, and there's great money to be made there as well, or will we only hanker for that hive mentality of technology for technology's sake? So in all of this, the underlying theme that I'm going on trying to emphasize is that we are faced with this incredible dilemma that I don't think human beings have ever faced before, which is that how will we remain human in the face of a power much larger and much more interconnected than we can ever hope to be? And in that, I think what I would like to leave ourselves with the thought is we are increasingly be pushed by technology to homogenize because it enjoys data sets. We are being pushed to become a data set. We have to, at the very beginning of our journeys as young people or anywhere in our profession, redeem our individuality. And for that, I think the first step we have to do is to start actively seeking out contrary opinion, actively as learners, as students, as people just joining a university, actively seek out contrary opinions, engage with people across the aisle, engage with thoughts that are not part of the air bubbles within which we are being pushed to live, not part of the hive mentality in which you're being pushed to live. So if it is news, remember, I was in Tehelka and in 1999, around 21 years back, I met people from UK and US who were very excited because this new technology was just coming up that you will be served the news that you like based on your interests. Now we are seeing the impact that has had because we're all living in our own completely soundproof air bubbles. We're only being served what we like. It reinforces our existing beliefs. It reinforces our prejudices. And so it's reinforcing completely parallel realities. So there's this extreme tension being built up where we are hyper-connected and yet we are being atomized, So what that creates is bewilderment, anger, a desire for violence, and a desire for and a complete breakdown in human communication. So I'll end with saying that I think it is crucial that we out of these bubbles, we enjoy the power that these technologies give us, but we constantly struggle to retain our individuality and our humanness and seek out the contrary opinions. Make sure that you have on your news list, on your learning lists, on your technology list, don't follow only one source, which is being served up to you by an algorithm designed by a designer you don't know, by a profit motive that you're not part of. So I'll leave you with those thoughts and I'd love to take some questions.
Thank you for a very interesting, very insightful, but also very troubling, narrative that we heard from you. Almost reminded me of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Absolutely.
Where 4 people decide to rebel. Now, my question is, when you are face to face with such a powerful technology, I'm not calling it a foe or an enemy, but it is something that we can't control. Are new ethical standards and norms necessary?
Yes, absolutely, Professor. Like I said, I think that I'm someone who really believes in freedom. So, there's a lot of talk now about breaking, in America, there's the antitrust legislations going on about breaking up the power of Apple and Google because, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, there's a big pushback, from governments. We've had face-offs between the technology companies and our own governments, but these are very complex issues, But so I don't want restriction on invention or on innovation because, that's where true creativity comes from. But I think what we need is what I was talking about, is that we need to start these kind of conversations and ultimately arrive at a kind of, I would say, almost like a humanities framework, legislative framework, ethical framework within which technologies function. So every time a new technology comes, I do think we need a framework. We need a constitution for technology, and because it has such a power to really become, like I was talking about, the fact that it's negative emotions in our children, in ourselves, in our society, we need, we do need some restriction on that. Now we need very sophisticated discussion about how that restriction will be framed, as much as we have a constitution for our country. So why should there not be a constitution for your technology? What we don't need are the kind of laws that our governments created, like that 66A, censorship. We don't need that. We need a constitution.
Students, the chat is open, so fire away your questions. But what you just said, Shoma, triggered a different thought in my mind. When you are surrounded by negativity and cynicism, it's so much more attractive because negativity catches attention far quicker than positivity. Isn't it very hard for people to form such communities which will generate different narratives from the usual negative, cynical, uh, or even falsified information that gets peddled around?
Yeah, I mean, so sadly, positivity doesn't sell the same way as negativity does. And we see that now on our television networks all the time. There's constant effort to create a fight rather than insight. So it is a very difficult task. But I think more than necessarily group behavior, Professor, what I am arguing for, and maybe young people will find it harder, but it's to arrive at a state of balance within yourself. And that's why I was saying, Elon Musk, I'm not saying that it's me as a liberal who's saying this, but if your students would research it, it's the founders of Facebook, from people like Elon Musk and others who are themselves delinking from the technologies they have created. They don't allow their children access to it. So I think what I'm arguing for is that de-link a little bit, and that we have the power to do ourselves. We don't need to be hyper-connected to a hive mind at every single moment of our day. So to retrieve that individual space for just a little bit of, your self journey, your individual journey of learning, your little cocoon of physical friends, interacting at a human scale rather than this gigantic global scale, I think everyone can retrieve that a little bit for themselves. And as you do that, you'll find you have less need to belong to a mob. You'll be able to step aside. The reason today you can't break out of this negativity is because your entire being is being defined by a group. How many likes, how many clicks, how much, is your thoughts mirroring whatever is trending on Twitter or whatever's trending on Republic TV, So it's not allowing you the space for individual thought. So even before we create alternate positive groups, I'm saying break away from groupism a little bit. And that's what the ultimate aim of all education and learning is to be able to have your own individual thought process.
I want to talk about one more dilemma that I often see around. We are surrounded by internet, which is a source of a great deal of information, lots of information. And yet, these people who are so naive that they will accept just about anything that's peddled their way. Okay, and this is creating a room for the so-called fake news. Every other month I get a WhatsApp message saying Indian anthem has been voted as the best anthem in the UN. And UN does not have any business voting one anthem over the other. But then there are claps and thumbs ups and things like that. What can we do to combat this menace of fake news and bring in some truth in listening or hearing?
So, this comes back repeatedly to what I was saying about very clear and deeply thought out legislations, So the positive sign in this is that the difficult thing is, like you said, there's an ocean. I mean, not just an ocean, there's an entire universe of news out there. Not even news, it's just connectivity, information connectivity out there. So I won't even call it news. But it's impossible to control. But because of this pushback from society, a lot of the big tech companies are being forced to begin to curate their content, because now even within our government intermediary rules, they have now become responsible for the content that is put on their platform, So now here again is another riddle, which is that the big companies like Twitter and others, like Twitter even put doubtful news on a Trump tweet, They've done it even to Indian ministers or Indian journalists, where they're saying that this is not reliable or this is, so they're beginning to grade the content that's being put out. So it's not censorship, it's a gradation, So that's one good thing. I think the real dilemma here now is not even the big companies, but that political parties, governments themselves can have WhatsApp groups and entire arteries of communication for which there's no editor, there's no buck stops anywhere. It's a disembodied thing, you know. So it is a very difficult question. And I think the government tried to say that to WhatsApp and Facebook, they said that if we find false information being shared on a WhatsApp group, we want you to track the origin of that so that we can take action, you know. And WhatsApp said that it's a very difficult thing to do because they'll have to change the entire algorithms and the entire technology. But this conversation is beginning, and it's important for society because we will arrive at the solutions, you know. But it's important for us to be raising those questions and becoming aware of it.
Social media works at lightning speed, as we have seen in the way mobs got organized, riots happened because of the power of the WhatsApp and the messages that went around.
Right.
Is there any solution at all to this? Because the governance, traditional arms of governance and tools of governance work very slowly. And there is just no comparison between the speed at which information, especially manufactured information, can be put out and the regulatory response or response from the government bodies. Is there a solution at all, or are we already lost?
Well, right now one does feel a little bit lost, not just because the technology is powerful, but because governments themselves are playing the game. You know, very often the worst kind of mob behavior is instigated by government media cells itself, you know. So there's a kind of, you see a kind of the same tweet being tweeted by thousands of people, and it's almost like a centralized instruction to do it. So there is that kind of, you know, there's too much complicity because it is such a powerful technology. Powerful players will want to use it themselves, you know. So the reason that I think there's not enough pushback on that is in the human minds that could invent such powerful technology, I'm sure can invent and design intelligent curbs on that technology, you know, which are fair, which are freedom loving, but which are credibility and reliability loving as well. But up until governments want that, there isn't that much pressure for technology companies to create it, you know. So, but as I said, I'm a great believer in things change, you know, the more you keep trying to foreground a conversation, things have impacts, you know. So as more and more people articulate the discomfort with reality as we are living it today, some change will come, positive change will come.
Students, this is the chat is open. There's questions for you to ask.
Are there any students at all? This is like talking into blank space.
No, there are 150 students.
Okay.
Okay.
Favorite books? I have so many, but one that I've just read, just top of my mind, is by Michael Pollan. It's How to Change Your Mind. And the reason why, and it's actually looking at psychedelics and the research around drugs, LSD, magic mushrooms. But what makes it very, very interesting is that it's really giving a lot of insight into neuroscience and the working of your mind. It's also being used as therapeutics now for depression and mental illnesses. But it's a fascinating book, and I'd suggest you read it. Since we are discussing the human mind, it came to mind immediately.
Right. While we wait for students to ask more questions, there are some from my side. Okay, here is one. Samaksh Jain.
I'm sorry, I'm not being able to see it. What
He
is your
suggestion? Samaksh says, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, you know, I think my suggestions are like we've, you know, I've been using this word constitution for technology again and again because, you know, when we became independent, we were a colonial, casteist, you know, very oppressed, uneducated, poor society because of so many years of rule. And yet we were able to frame a very, very enlightened constitution because we didn't just react to that situation. We didn't just react to the immediate things. We reached for first principles. So we are the first democracy in the world, not America, not England, nobody. It was India that gave overnight, the right to vote, equal freedoms, all our fundamental freedoms were given to people across the board, regardless of whether you were educated, your caste, your property, whether you were a man or a woman, neither sex, religion, creed. Now, this is what I mean about a really enlightened constitution for technology. So what is happening right now, which is very worrying, is that governments are reacting to, they want regulation based on a particular crisis. Crisis is never the best time to think out a regulation, because you're just reacting in a reactive state. What we need is a discussion on first principles. What are the principles of technology? What is going to be useful for society? What are the values we want technology to reflect? It should be equality, freedom, inclusivity, diversity. All the values that are there in our constitution should also be should also be the principles that underlie the regulatory framework for technology. So I don't know if you understood what I'm saying, but that's really what I think. And like I told you, if you look up this algorithm of justice, that's exactly their work, that they're trying to inject ideas of inclusivity, diversity, equality, sensitivity, all of that into the coding of technology. That's what I think should be the regulatory base.
So in a world like this, are new jobs being created, new opportunities for students to focus upon?
Yes, I think a massive amount of fascinating jobs. There's, like I said, the positive aspect of the connectivity entrepreneurs. They're, of course, the delivery economy and all of that, which is the pure blue collar jobs. But in terms of, my niece, for instance, is studying anthropology and sociology in Edinburgh. And she was asked, she was saying, what is the jobs available? I don't want to just do an academic job. And I was telling her that all these technologies that we're talking about, actually, so, for your technology students, there's no dearth of jobs. Everything now needs technology. Every corner of our life, from sexuality, entertainment, sports, agriculture, climate change, banking, finance, you name it, even everything, beauty, everything needs technology. So there are enough jobs there. But I'm saying that there's a great interface, because every technology, for it to be effective and human, is going to need a human interface. So increasingly, technology companies, I hope, are going to hire anthropologists, historians, lawyers, ethicists. There has to be an ecosystem around every technology. So I think there will be a lot of jobs. Then there will be jobs like, like I've been describing these young people, algorithm of justice, that there'll be people who will have to become editorial custodians of content, gatekeepers of content, fact checkers, investigators of data, investigators of impact, sociological impact. So I think, a lot of new spaces and jobs, design, all that is going to come up. So what is definitely true is that there's a massive disruption of jobs at the moment, and I didn't mention earlier, like one stark figure during this pandemic, we're all celebrating digital democracy. You and I all of us are talking to each other. But in these 2 years, 247 million children have fallen off the education map, because of the digital divide. So there's a lot of work to be, especially in India, there's no dearth of different kinds of jobs that we can create for ourselves. How much screen time is healthy from learning time? I'm hardly the judge for that. I'm sure it differs differently I would say that it's not so much, too much of our lives now are on the screen. So definitely we need our exercise, your social time. I think definitely being off the phone, because increasingly when you're with people, you're not with them, you're so much more with others. So that's like, I think again, like rather than determinate, I think just becoming self-aware is very important. And also, how much of just passive screen time are you doing? How much are you just scrolling, Instagram, or just scrolling to see how many likes? How much of it is like active engagement? So I think that balance between just like passive potato time, that's that sense of social absence that we live with all the time, where you're with people and you're not connected. I think we have to become more vigilant of all of that. And I guess there must be out there. I try to be a very liberal mom, so I haven't defined the number of hours, but I define the quality of that screen time. So there's a question from Kriti that we had conversation about social media. So basically, these days the world is more into social world than virtual. Even most of our important information is provided through mails or WhatsApp groups. We are not aware if we are provided with true info or not. So what are your viewpoints regarding this? I don't know, Kriti, if you joined earlier when I was talking, that I was saying that any news that you get, I obviously, all of us are political beings. You have a certain value system from within which you live. You have certain prejudices within which you live. So even if you get an information on WhatsApp or on email, what I'm asking you to become is an active seeker of information. So the moment you get anything which is beginning to like get you heated up, immediately go looking for alternative sources of information, so that you can use your own mind on, you get two sets of information. You say, okay, does that sound plausible? Does that sound real? Would someone like that do that? Are they saying this is a police handout, or are they giving me actual facts? So start applying your mind actively. And then, of course, I would still say, of course, there are problems with traditional media, but still in traditional media, there's an editor at the end of that information line who takes responsibility, who takes accountability. Now, I've been an editor of investigative magazines, and, so we may get something wrong, but at the end of it, there would be a me or another editor who's held accountable. So then you're more careful about something, so let's not discount the traditional sources of news that much. But yes, let's be aware that they're all politically aligned now. So just use our minds more with greater and greater clarity. And there's great hope in your generation, because you're young, there's still idealism, and there's still that capacity not to be caught up in this treadmill, to create a new reality, So our generation has created this world that you're living in, but you are capable of changing that as technicians, as designers, as technology inventors. Change the logic of how all of this is done. Yeah, Sanjeev, you've said as technology has increased, advancement and stress are both at a peak. I agree with you, so I don't know how to respond to that, but yes, I agree with you. But as I said, none of it is a given. None of this is not like a unchangeable reality. Everything can change, So what we are discussing is bringing positive change to technology by using what your university is trying to do, human and literary and historical and social consciousness into technology.
So does that mean, Shoma, that we have to relook at what universities should do? Should we have new courses? Should we redefine the engagement with students?
I would definitely think so, Professor. I think this whole talk series that you're doing is like triggers and catalysts, but I think there should be now courses, where there's the pure invention, pure science, pure discovery, which is, as I said, there should be no regulation on that. But as there should, our discussion, the social discussion around technology should keep up with the pace at which technology is moving. And that right now there's a massive gap, and that's what the real issue is.
What would you say is the role of parents here?
Well, so much of it is a function of where the parents themselves are placed in terms of this journey. There are many parents who participate in the Hive behavior. So I'd find it hard to give a black and white, and very often our most enlightening inputs don't necessarily come from our family. We are fortunate if it does, but that's the whole point of going to school and meeting educators and having this whole world, this beautiful world of the internet at our disposal, that we can break away so much. We put so much hope in the young because they're meant to break away from the old, and so have I would say it would be great if parents play a great role, but we are all part of an older world, the young should be, but human values are constant. You want compassion, you want inclusion, you want freedom, you want equality. I don't think there can be any moral discussion around that. So how you arrive at that, each generation finds new ways of doing it. So I would say that the young should seek it and teach us some new things.
So does that mean that teacher becomes more important than parents, in as much as time you are 18, you want to listen to somebody else and not your parents?
Yeah, I do think teachers are, I think every student that gets somewhere, and a teacher can take any form, it could be a professor or a teacher in a university. It could be someone completely in an outside world. It's who you learn from, But I think everyone who arrives somewhere where they look back and feel that I lived a good life is that you meet someone who catalyzes a new thought in you, someone who gives you that moment of wow, and gives you a sense of agency. So much of our education is about following. It's so much about towing the line. It's about conforming. It's about success and wealth. But to be young is to be alive, is to feel your own power. And I think a true teacher, whether it's a professor, a parent, a friend, a stranger, or something you read or hear on the internet, is about who gives you that energy and that power of feeling, oh my God, like I have power to learn, to change, to be the designer of things, that individual thought, individual agency is the heart of all learning, I think,
Yeah, one more question in the Q&A. Himanshu Yadav says technology is bad for health because it makes you lazy. What are your views?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's so much talk about that. There's China literally has de-addiction centers for its young now. And this passive life, there are lots of cartoons which show that as human beings evolve, soon our bodies will emaciate and we'll be like stick figures with heads, because far from the Renaissance man where you had beautiful muscular bodies, because there was so much emphasis on the human self, the entire composite human self. Now there's so much emphasis only on the mind that, yes, we all know, we have so many lifestyle diseases, backaches, heart attacks, stress diseases, obesity, all of that. So, but what I'm going on trying to emphasize is that all of it is still in our hands. How much you have your hand on the volume control of technology, how much you use it, how much you stay away from it is in our hands. And that's the agency that I'm trying to impart. We all have individual agency.
So does that mean if you turn your back on technology, you are going to be denied from high wage jobs? And I don't mean to be dismissive here, but then you will become a Zomato delivery person.
Actually, it's very interesting. The opposite is really true, because now I'm not advocating anyone turning their back on technology. I'm going on talking about nuance. It's about how much you'll make it serve you. You'll choose it. You'll choose how much you engage with technology. I'm absolutely not advocating turning away from technology. That would be hypocritical. At the very basic, you and I are using technology to interact. So no, and as I said, there's too many advantages. But in fact, the opposite is true, that as futurists are projecting the future of humankind, they're saying that everything that is data, that is merely the intelligence aspect of human beings, will get replaced by machines. It's creativity, communication, and there's a third C in it: creativity, communication, and I'm forgetting what the third. And I think, right, the care industry, the compassion care industry. So again, it's like human empathy. Those things are not going to be replaceable by machines. So in fact, there's going to be a high demand for high EQ level jobs, because no machine can do that, And as social unrest grows, as political dilemmas, economic dilemmas grow, you're actually going to need a lot of humanities related jobs to help unravel all of that. And as I said, to help humanize technology. Because as human beings feel more and more crowded out by technology, there will be a pushback. It'll take different forms, greater militancies, fundamentalisms, etc. But you're going to need very high thinking minds to unravel this complex situation that's going on. So that's for creativity.
We're almost at the end of our session. There is a question from Sonika. Technology or mental health? Which one should we prefer?
Well, I think I'm starting to repeat myself. In fact, it's almost worrying that you are in a way reinforcing what we are talking about, that we've got designed into needing a yes or no answer, this or that. It goes back to George Bush saying, us or them, are you with us or against us? That's not how human beings are built. None of us. That's what I was saying, that when you're alone, we don't exist in a I hate my mother or I love my mother mode. There'll be times when you feel irritated. There are times when you feel absolutely enchanted by your parents or your friends. There are times when you're irritated or you don't like aspects of them. The whole point of being human is to be complex, So this is not an either or. To preserve my mental health, should I become someone who I love nature, but should I only become someone who looks, who grows grass? No, that's not any of us. I mean, the mobile phone has created so much of power in the hands of, even the labor class, even our construction workers. So this is not an either or. And I'd like to end by saying that my plea, the whole point of why we took this discussion was to break away from this. We've been designed. It is not our natural state. We are being designed to want black and white answers. That is not to be human. And that's why I said, how do we stay human in a technological world? First of all, in our complexity.
Almost at the end. So let me end with this question. What would be your 2 or 3 lessons for young students of today?
I think I'll just reinforce some of the things I said. Seek individuality, seek multiple sources of information, find a balance between your virtual world and your real world. Do not put all your sense of self basis the opinion of others, how much you're liked or not. And I'd end again with saying, retrieve our complexity. Remember, we are the ones who created this technology. We can use it as much as it makes us feel healthy. And when it is giving you anxiety, we have to de-link our minds, and remember that we are the makers of our own reality.
That's wonderfully said. It has been a gripping narrative from your side, one that is both interesting and troubling. I think we must walk away with a sense of unease as to what kind of times we are living in. But thank you very much for being with us here. On behalf of NorthCap University, I thank you very much and hope to host you on the campus when this COVID restrictions are behind us.
Absolutely. I'd like to end on a note of hope though, Professor. You said that it's very disturbing, but I think what I was constantly reinforcing is that it's a very changeable situation as well, because there's nothing, at every stage in history, people feel they're locked into a certain reality and then history changes, So the reason we're so excited about talking to young people is that change is always possible, So yeah.
Human nature always triumphs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. On that positive note, let us end the session. Thank you.
Thank you.